Yoga is that science by which the soul gains mastery over the instruments of body and mind and uses them to attain self-realization, the reawakened consciousness of its transcendent, immortal nature, one with spirit. As an individualized self, the soul has descended from the universality of spirit and become identified with the limitations of the body and its sense consciousness. The Bhagavad Gita says, "The Supreme Spirit, transcendent and existing in the body, is the detached beholder, the consenter, the sustainer, the experiencer, the great Lord, and also the highest self. The self, though seated everywhere in the body, is ever taintless." The soul remains essentially untouched and unchanged by its confinement in the body. But through Maya or delusion, it becomes subjectively identified with change and mortality until the consciousness evolves and through self-realization reawakens to its immortal state. Yoga is a complete science encompassing the spiritualization of each aspect of man's threefold nature: body, mind, and soul. The yogi sees the human organism as a gross condensation of subtle spiritual forces under the control of the soul. He realizes that the body and the life or consciousness within it are distinct entities, and that man is not the mortal body, but the transcendent immortal consciousness. He learns that the efferent and afferent nerves are the means of the soul's communication with matter, and by spiritualizing this communication, the soul expresses through the body its divine potential. The yogi learns that by means of imagination or visualization, will and pranayama, life energy control, he can dim the lights of the senses, sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste, whenever he doesn't wish to be disturbed by their messages. He has full control over and can enter at will the waking state, the dream state, the deep sleep state, the psychological, the subconscious, and the supersubconscious, and the superconscious state. The yogi masters the art of mind control. He shuts off mental restlessness and imagination and avoids absent-mindedness by practice of the following: A. Passivity, or even-mindedness under all conditions. B. Positive concentration that is keeping the mind on one particular thought at a time. C. Negative concentration means using your focus and willpower to actively dismiss or filter out any unwanted thoughts, allowing your mind to become more clear and controlled. D. Transferring consciousness from feeling to will or ideas. E. Transferring consciousness from emotions such as love or hatred to self-control or creative thinking or pure feeling. F. Focus on just one sensation at a time, whether it's sight, sound, smell, taste, or touch. Hold your attention on that single experience, allowing yourself to fully explore and notice its details before moving on. G. Visualization of mental images and creating and dissolving dreams at will. H. Mental anesthesia that is receiving sensations of pain as informative reports rather than experiences of suffering. Physiological methods of self-mastery. The physiological methods employed by the yogi to gain self-mastery include: A. Outward relaxation and removal of physical restlessness by skeletal, nervous, and muscular discipline. B. Relaxation of involuntary organs such as the heart and lungs. C. Fasting to cleanse the body and make it more dependent on prana or life force, the true sustainer of life and energy in the body. D. Learning to sleep and wake at will. When the yogi has mastered the processes of life, he is also a master over death. Is death a misfortune or a blessing in disguise? Death is a peculiar phenomenon, signifying cessation of all vital functions of the body without capability of resuscitation. It is cessation of the soul's residence in that bodily form. The very word death strikes terror in the hearts of human beings because of the following associations: the predominant dread thought of excruciating corporeal pain, supposedly accompanying death; the psychological pain of facing separation from family and friends, and from the joys of earthly life and possessions. The fear of losing one's existence. But natural death is nothing to fear. The indwelling soul is immortal. Natural death is a blessing because it offers the soul an opportunity to exchange a dilapidated, tottering dwelling place for a new and sturdy one. The soul requires the successive instrumentalities of new and better organisms in order to express itself fully. If the individualized soul, cloaked in delusion and sent out to evolve itself back to God, didn't have a chance to express itself, to assert its nature through various changing bodies, it would have to remain in a nascent or latent disembodied state. And imagine if the immortal soul had to live forever in an old bent body, pallid and shrunken. No greater punishment could be meted out to this great one, the soul, than to behold and express through the same decrepit organism forever. Instead, the inhabited organism undergoes the soul's discipline as the soul experiments with it, and when the soul's work is finished on that particular form, it works on another. Matter is wrought with change, and the spirit within it, though essentially unchangeable, superficially undergoes change by its subjective experience of that phenomenon. As subjective consciousness of sameness of identity is retained from early childhood to old age, except, perhaps, in the less perceptive earliest stages of infancy and the last stages of extreme old age, so also there is no reason why that subjective consciousness cannot be retained before birth and after death. With that continuity of consciousness, death is seen truly as the soul's best friend, giving it infinite opportunities to wrestle with matter and finally overcome it, even after a million defeats. This true friend teaches the soul to manifest its unchangeable nature by transcending the consciousness of change. The human mind prefers change in environs, tastes, habits, and possessions, not because it cannot stick to one thing, but because it is constantly finding out that its attention has been misplaced and misdirected. Its craving for something unknown does not remain satisfied with the acquisition of possessions of the world of changing things. Through new opportunities afforded by death and changing conditions, the soul is seeking its innate changelessness, and so never feels satisfied until it acquires and becomes re-established in its natural state of oneness with spirit. Hence death, or change of the condition in which the soul temporarily resides, is conducive to the soul's growth and development. The growth and education of life mean nothing more than that the manifesting consciousness in matter evolves to ultimately express its full potential, thereafter to be sifted from matter in order to know and free itself as an independent entity that can stay without the agency of matter. During the learning process, before the self-pushing diligent soul realizes its superiority and transcendental nature, it is strongly attached to the bodily instrument through the compelling sensory and egoistic ties created during its residence in the body. Hence, the soul watches its new body in each new incarnation with the care and possessiveness of a man with a newly bought automobile. Consequently, death that is brought on prematurely by disease from unnatural living or bad karma, or by so-called accidents and other misfortunes, involves mental and bodily pain, because the manifesting soul becomes extremely worried when it sees its vehicle of expression being taken away before the expiry of the natural term. The spiritual psychology of pain. The pain produced on a human organism by a pinprick is beneficial. As a warning, it reports to the soul the punctured condition of the skin, needing repair. The sensation ought not to vex the soul, but should serve as a matter of academic information. It is possible to know each bodily or mental experience of ourselves and others without being moved or troubled by any of them. Vexation and suffering are born of strong imagination and the soul's bad habit of translating sensation into pain. If this bad habit and imagination and the ensuing restless or excited state of feeling were to disappear from human consciousness, man's bodily suffering would be cut down 100%. He would not even require anesthesia during surgery. But one should not venture to forego anesthetics if he is not sufficiently strong-minded. A sudden imagination of pain might cause such reaction as to produce death. In Indian ashrams in olden times, children were taught from an early age how to watch bodily changes with an academic interest. This doesn't mean indifference or negligence in attending to a wound or treating disease. Rather, it is denial of pain and refusal to suffer, recognizing that suffering is not endowed to man, either by nature or by divine fiat. Bodily pain is merely a sensation intended to give an intimation or report to the brain of a certain bodily state requiring attention. It should not cause suffering. Attend to bodily pain, but do not worry or weep over it. The suffering of death is self-inflicted. Ordinarily, to the animal man, one living unnaturally, out of harmony with his soul nature, untimely death is a terrible thing. It does produce great agony. But this so-called suffering is brought on by the soul's bad habit of magnifying and changing an intellectual perception into feeling. For example, suffering that comes from belief in goblins and spooks, as in nightmares, or intense fears that produce traumas and convulsions, demonstrate that acute pain is experienced in the physical organism through mental agency only. Natural death, that is, in old age or whenever the soul is ready to change its mortal form, is just like the falling of ripe fruit from the tree of its own accord, without the resistance that green fruit exhibits when being pulled down by a storm or other great force. But in premature death, through disease, accident, or other causes, the soul puts up strong resistance, hence acute agony is witnessed in the body. In this tumult and struggle of consciousness, there is a great sorrow, a sense of helplessness, and the soul's deluded nature finally becomes unconscious as death occurs, like the onset of deep sleep. This helplessness during death is mistakenly supposed by some to be a punishment from God. As a matter of fact, it is just a working out of the soul's persistent, self-created bad habit of being identified with change instead of regarding bodily changes as a means of expressing itself. Thus, the fear of death, acquired through social or hereditary agency, and the agony of untimely death, the result of identifying oneself with bodily changes instead of viewing them as a witness, are self-inflicted, which is despicable and terrible. Ordinary painful death is to be avoided by attaining self-realization. In that consciousness, the yogi experiences no pain in natural death, retains consciousness and identity after death, lives in his soul nature and knows that nature is all-powerful and immortal. Why, after death, the ordinary man forgets his former life? Unnatural death and death in a state of bodily attachment are not only painful, they also obscure memory. Of course, unless one is spiritually advanced, it is not always desirable to remember one's former life. The after-death oblivion of one's previous identity allows him to forget his past consciousness of failure, pain, and attachments, and to begin life anew. The only disadvantage is that if he has not learned from past wrong actions, he may repeat those experiences, ignoring the warning of their consequences, just as the inveterate alcoholic continues to drink the infernal liquid, even with the conscious knowledge of probable death from liver damage. Though the pure consciousness of the soul maintains a continuity of remembrance from one life to another, the body-identified consciousness does not. The fact is, memory after death cannot survive under the following conditions. First, if there is attachment to the body. Second, if there is attachment for past possessions, family, or friends. Third, if there is a strong entanglement in bad karma, and if one has not risen above the effects of both good and bad actions. If, as in first and second, the newborn soul remembered and was attached to its previous body, possessions, family, or friends, imagine the agony and frustration the soul would feel in a new incarnation. It would not like to begin a different life amidst a new environment, a new family, and new friends. The soul is a brother to all mankind. Imagine how narrow it would become if it loved only one small circle of human beings. It would not expand, and it wouldn't let those other souls expand to reach the ultimate goal of unity. We must realize this oneness of our soul with all souls in the unity of the one spirit, and it is impossible to do so unless the soul expands its sphere of family and friends to include all. In the case of third above, the soul would be extremely discouraged, remembering past bad karma, struggles, and suffering, and wouldn't have the will to make new efforts to progress. It would forget its transcendent nature. At the conclusion of each lifetime, death washes away all dark impressions, memories of failures and sins, and prejudiced conceptions, so that the soul can begin afresh to express itself in newer ways and make newer efforts to rise above and free itself from matter. How to cut the cords of the soul's attachments. Following are the ways to cut the cords of the soul's attachments in order to release it. Practice titiksha, the art of remaining even-minded while watching and analyzing bodily changes. A. During extreme heat. B. During severe cold. C. During a fever. D. While suffering from a head cold, concentrate on the nasal cartilage and mucous membrane. E. During pain from a wound or other bodily affliction. Don't try to ignore it. Watch it as a diminishing feeling of sensation, manifesting to you only as a matter of knowledge. You will find that the greater your knowledge about its specific nature, the less will be the feeling of pain associated with it. Thus, learn to distinguish between knowledge of a bodily condition reported by the sensation of pain and the terrible fear or agony that is self-inflicted by the idea habit of pain. F. During a sorrowful state of mind. G. During the state of mind when it is overjoyed to possess a longed-for object. The above teaches endurance and an objective non-attachment, and thereby produces a super-feeling, a superconscious phase of consciousness, by which changing bodily conditions are looked upon with an academic interest, and the restless excitement of sensations is neutralized. Analyze and feel how the sensations of color and form, sounds, odors, tastes, and touch are transmitted through the channel of the nerves to the optical, auditory, olfactory, gustatory, and tactual centers in the brain. Watch the stimulus proceed from the tympanum as an auditory vibration in the nerves, or a vibration of taste proceeding from the mouth, as when eating tasty curries, or tactual vibrations coming from stimuli on the outer surface of the body. Feel the movements of the diaphragm, the expansion and deflation of the lungs, the beating heart. Feel the circulation in the body. It is strongly felt after a leg or hand has been asleep. It can also be felt rushing to the brain during anger or other emotions. A man of keen perception and concentration can feel even normal circulation. Learn to cause movements in each muscle individually through muscle will exercise. Analyze the sensation of thirst, then drink hot or cold water and follow the sensation from mouth to throat, through the esophagus to the stomach. Watch the body states during a 24-hour fast, then observe how food goes into the system. Feel the closing of the epiglottis as the food passes over it and into the alimentary canal. Feel the movement of the stomach. Feel the peristaltic action of the intestines. Notice how smelling salts or perfumes strike the olfactory region, stir the brain cells into action, and become elaborated into perception and conception. Try this with various odors and tastes. Feel the immediate thoughts generated by a given sensation. See if you can separate sensation, perception, and conception. Try to distinguish between a given sensation and the memory of it through association of ideas. That is, try to distinguish between the flavor of a specific apple and that of previously tasted apples. Don't mix the two. Distinguish in music, apart from its variations and undulations, the feeling engendered by it through the different notes, from lower to higher, its general vibrations on the tympanum and on the whole body surface, its effect on the breath and on the inner walls of the body, and its transmission through the tympanum to the brain. Feel the sensation of the ingoing and outgoing breath in the lungs. Observe how breathing is affected by your surroundings, your thoughts, your actions. Conversely, scrutinize the thoughts and feelings generated in you by changes in the depth or rhythm of the breath. Be aware of the perfect state and sense of well-being during good health. If pain or disease comes, before crying out, try to analyze what it is. Strive to separate the physiological malfunction from the mental process that translates sensation into pain through the habit of fear and imagination. Above all, the greatest method is to hold more and more to the calm, breathless, conscious, powerful state that follows a long period of concentrated prayer or deep positive thinking or repetition of hymns or affirmations, or highest of all, meditation, stilling body and mind with the self-realization technique of concentration, merging the consciousness with the sound of and magnetizing the spine and brain by practice of Kriya Yoga. When the heart and breath are calm, when the heaviness of body weight disappears and you feel light, when sensations are neutralized and the mind is still, the soul begins to know itself as existing apart from the body. The object of all the foregoing practices is to separate the soul from matter. Sensations must be of intellectual interest with non-attached feeling. You must be able to completely disassociate and distinguish your own existence and happiness from the pleasant or unpleasant feelings of your senses and other bodily experiences. When you change the center of consciousness, perception, and feeling from the body and mind to the soul, your true, immortal, transcendental self, you will have the yogi's mastery over life and victory over death.